Good afternoon once again, Excellencies, distinguished dignitaries, um, participants who are here in person, and also who have joined us virtually or online. Um, Let me first extend a warm greetings from my Director General, His Excellency Dr. Ajay Mathur from International Solar Alliance, and myself, I'm Nar Khatiwara with International Solar Alliance. It's a great privilege and honor to be the host of this session, which is hosted by International Solar Alliance and co-hosted by our partner, International Water Management Institute, and also United Nations Development Program. Thank you, IMI and UNDP, for supporting us and putting this all together. Um, this is the second session for today's program, and among the series of programs that ISA has hosted in this pavilion, it is the 27th session. And once again, welcome to this very pertinent topic, that is solar energy for agriculture, solar energy for livelihoods, particularly touching on the rural communities, and also looking at the knowledge and best practices, that is opportunities for South-South learning, as well as looking at collaboration for scaling up. Um, this program is divided into three parts. The opening session, where our invited guests will present their opening remarks, and then people from our ISA side, and the regulator from the invitees who couldn't attend today. And second part is very much interesting presentation from EME, where we'll be diving deep into the stock take, global stock take, particularly solar on agriculture and livelihoods, and then panel discussion with our experts. So with this, without further ado, um, let me invite Ms. Sandeep Singh to kindly deliver the opening as well as welcome remarks. Sandeep, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Nar, and a very good afternoon to you all. Um, I'm delivering this opening remarks and welcome on behalf of our Director General and the Chief Operating Officer, Joshua Wycliffe, who couldn't be here. And please, we'd like to, we are very thankful that you could join us for this very important session. We are having this session, and it's in partnership with the United Nations Development Program and the International Water Management Institute, IWMI. And again, together with our partners, we welcome you to this session. There are some participants who are joining us online, and we'd like to also welcome them. Um, uh, to this very important session at COP28 on solar energy for agriculture and rural livelihoods, opportunities for South-South learning cooperation. As we embark on a journey towards sustainable development and improved livelihoods and well-being of the people in need, reshaping the agricultural landscape with clean energy solutions such as the integration of solar technology remains pertinent to, in Africa and Asia and in the Pacific island countries. This session blends and is one of the most important programs that is being implemented by the by ISA and scaling solar applications for agricultural use, where we focus mainly on decentralized solar applications in rural settings, which include solar powered irrigation systems such as solar pumps, solar drying, solar home lighting systems, and other off grid applications, which all directly or indirectly support agriculture and rural livelihoods. Under the Solar for Agriculture program, ISR is currently working with over 21 countries in Africa and Asia Pacific region. And our member countries have expressed interest in more than 270,000 solar water pumps. This is in addition to the demonstration solar pump projects that we are supporting in LDCEs and SIDS. In terms of collaboration and partnerships, we are working closely and implementing with our partners projects and programs in the African region. And we are also collaborating with the IBSA Fund and partnering with UNDP to develop demonstration projects in 10 member countries. Initiatives in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Mali, Niger, South Sudan, Tonga, Tuvalu, Uganda, Senegal, and Benin mark crucial steps in our collective journey. ISA is also collaborating with ADB in supporting 6 South Asian countries, and these are Bhutan, Bangladesh, India, Maldives, Nepal, and Sri Lanka in scaling up solar for agriculture applications such as solar water pumps, cold storage. And we are also increasing our engagement in the Asia Pacific region. In the last decade, remarkable progress has been witnessed in adoption of solar powered solution across rural areas by different international organizations and local agencies. These solutions ranging from solar pumps to for irrigation to lighting and dryers and cold chains have matured, though at varying rates across different regions. And the integration of solar technology into agriculture is transforming rural lives and livelihoods across the global south. That has created a huge learning, knowledge, products, and experiences. ISA is proud to be at the forefront of this movement, working with our partners in collaboration to scale up solar powered solutions through these learnings and create more sustainable and equitable future for all. Again, on behalf of our Director General and the entire ISA team, we would like to welcome you and thank you for joining us in this important session. We will be hearing from many of their countries and experts who are here. So we look forward to collaborating more and engaging with all the countries who are parties not only to UNFCCC but also members of the ISA. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Sandeep, for highlighting the key areas where ISA is focusing, particularly in this our journey in terms of supporting our member countries for solarizing agriculture sector. Um, uh, Currently at ISA, we have over 118 member countries, and if we look at this particular program, since we were founded in 2015 at COP 21, if you look at this, and then the journey that we have placed the solar for agriculture application and use has been actually considered the first program to be launched in 2016. So ISA has placed always agriculture as also as a heart of the solarizing activities. Thank you once again, Sandeep. And we have a very interesting deep dive presentations that will be done by Mr. Silk Verma. He is also the deputy country representative from EMI in India. You'll be presenting about solarization of agriculture or global stock take, particularly from the best global practices, as well as our work with particularly Asian Pacific region as well. So, Mr. Self, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nar, and welcome everyone. Um, if you were here in the last session, also, it was about a global stock take on renewable energy progress in general. Now we are going a little bit into the specifics and looking at what's happening around the world on expansion of solar powered irrigation, but also other solar applications in agriculture. Um, what I'm sharing is the work that EMI has been doing over the last 10 or 12 years in partnership with a lot of partners. We started our solar work in India way back in 2011. And I will explain why, as a water management institute, we got interested in solar irrigation. But then, since then, given the huge potential of solar irrigation on impacting positively the lives and livelihoods of rural communities, our portfolio of work has expanded in India. Where I think our work has been quite influential in also informing and inspiring policies, but also around the world, including in Africa. I'm not sure if I'm doing this right. Okay. Okay. So, what we want to do really is to take stock and do a synthesis of what is happening on in this field. Now, there is a lot of solar irrigation pumps that have been deployed in South Asia. Um, Less so and smaller pump sizes in Africa, but also in terms of the potential, I think it's even greater in terms of the impact that the solar energy technologies can make on the livelihoods. Now, there are four broad trajectories which our work suggests through which solar is going to transform food systems around the world. One is, of course, to help rain-fed farmers move into irrigated agriculture in a way that is affordable and also sustainable. Um, in Africa, we know that the irrigation coverage is right now only 5 or 6%. In Asia, it's slightly more, but still there is plenty of scope to expand irrigation sustainably. There's also two major transitions in terms of the energy transition. There is a shift from diesel pumps, diesel irrigation to solar irrigation, and also electric pumps can be shifted to solar irrigation pumps. And that's happening. The first one is happening around the world because a lot of places off-grid irrigation systems are dependent on petrol or diesel. And the second one is happening more so in South Asia, where millions of farmers actually use subsidized or free electricity to run their irrigation pumps, and that creates perverse incentives for overexploitation of groundwater. And solarization there can actually act as a instrument of groundwater governance, and I will talk a bit more about it. Finally, the pulse or pure applications, the other productive uses of solar energy in agriculture. That's the fourth kind of pillar of this food system transformation that will be led from solarization. Now, this first one, the one where we're talking about sustainable irrigation expansion, shifting from rain-fed to irrigated agriculture, that is mostly happening in sub-Saharan Africa, but it has also potential in Latin America as well as in different parts of South Asia, which are probably more off-grid. Uh, in India, for example, there are hardly any off-grid villages now, but there is a lot of agriculture that still remains off-grid. So most of Eastern India, as well as the Central Tribal India, farm, rural communities have grid connections in their houses, but they're still running their irrigation pumps with diesel, and and that causes limitations to the amount of irrigation that is happening, and solar can play a role there. The second is the shifting from diesel, reducing pollution, but also reducing the cost of irrigation. As the cost of diesel has been rising around the world, that has been limiting the productivity of agriculture because farmers tend to economize on irrigation because of the high cost of diesel. That is mostly happening in South Asia at the moment, but again, it has potential all over the world, including in parts of Africa where we have pockets of intensive irrigation, which is mostly led by petrol or diesel pumps. The third, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more detail, is solarization of electric pumps, and I'll come to that later. Mostly the potential for this is in South Asia, and that's where most of the action is right now happening. But there are also other pockets where farmers use either free or subsidized electricity, and that creates problems of groundwater governance. And that's where solar can play a role to improve governance of groundwater. The pure applications or the pulse applications, there's been a lot of work on this, especially in Africa and led by the World Bank. And EMI has also been working with partners in India to try out what else can be done. Irrigation is not a constant demand. You need a lot of energy for irrigation for maybe 20 to 30 days in a year. For most other days in the year, you will have surplus capacity. So, how to use that surplus capacity for productive uses? That's the challenge here, and that's the work where a lot of experimentation is going on, both in Africa as well as in Asia. Now, how much of this experimentation has actually led to scaling up? If you look at just the potential of solar applications in agriculture, I think most of global south is well endowed with solar energy. I think most people in this room don't need to be told about that. But most of the early solarization has happened in South Asia. A lot of solar pumps in, deployment has been in India, about 350,000 of them, maybe a bit more. And the numbers are increasing every day. But also, Bangladesh has been one major kind of leader in this field, where a lot of diesel pumps are being solarized through public private partnerships. But the potential for this is probably much more in Africa, Central Asia, as well as in Latin America. Now, the reason why South Asia has been an early leader is not very difficult to understand. South Asia is actually the epicenter of pump irrigation. No other part of the world uses electricity or energy to pump water as much as South Asia does. In India alone, there are about 21 million wells and tube wells, which farmers use to pump 250 to 300 billion cubic meters of groundwater. And they are spread all over. Each of these blue dots on the India map you see represent 5,000 structures. And each of the red dots, the blue maps are electric structures, and the red dots are diesel structures. And the ones that you see in Pakistan are bigger dots because they are bigger in size. So, if we just solarize all of irrigation in South Asia, that itself would be more than 200 gigawatt. So, that's the kind of potential that solarization has in this part of the world. And because this solarization is happening quite rapidly, it is basically reconfiguring the nexus between water, energy, food, and ecosystems in this world. What are the different business models that have been tried? I'm going to summarize the kind of typology of business models. I'm not going to go into the details of a lot of them, but I'm going to talk a little bit more detail about two innovations on which EME has been working. The first thing that we noticed based on EME's work is that solar pumps come in all shapes and sizes. They're off grid, they're also grid connected, they are small sub HP solar pumps, and there are also large 100 HP, 100 kilowatt solar panels, which have been deployed by farmers to run community irrigation systems. The most common form of solarization is individual off-grid solar pumps. This is popular all over Africa, but also in many parts of Asia. I think out of all the solar pumps that have been deployed for irrigation, probably 95, 96, maybe even more percent is this type. These are off-grid systems. They're not connected. They're not meant to be used for any other purpose, but just to pump water for irrigation. The key problem is the high capital cost, and you either need a subsidy from the government or a donor to actually deploy these systems, because even at the low cost that we now have seen over the last 10 years, the solar pumps are still beyond the capacity of farmers, small farmers especially, to buy on their own from the market. And the other key challenge is the surplus capacity. I talked about how irrigation is not a constant demand throughout the year. And what do you do with the surplus energy capacity that we are creating on the ground? And the final is the perverse incentives. If we are going to deploy, especially in areas which are groundwater scarce, where groundwater depletion is a problem, like in many parts of India, if we are going to deploy off grid solar pumps, which have no other purpose but to pump groundwater, then we find that there might be a tendency for farmers to overuse groundwater, and that can make groundwater situation worse. And we are trying to find business models that can basically solve this problem. That's where one experiment that EME has done, we call Spark, or solar power as a remunerative crop. We've argued that actually solar energy is the best crop farmers in South Asia can grow. It can give them much better return than any of the crops that they are growing right now. It requires very little input, and if the surplus energy that these solar pumps have, that can be evacuated to the grid and the farmers can be paid for it, then that also creates positive incentives for farmers to be energy efficient and therefore water efficient. And that's a pilot that EME had done in Gujarat, in Western India, and that is now also one of the pillars of Government of India's solarization policy. There are solar enterprises and entrepreneurs because most of the farmers in South Asia have stamp-sized parcels on which they irrigate. It doesn't make sense for every farmer to invest in a 5 kilowatt solar pump. So what we are seeing is that there is potential to create green jobs by promoting solar entrepreneurs and also create solar enterprises which can actually deliver solar irrigation as a service. There's a lot of experimentation on this happening in Asia, but also in Africa. Solar entrepreneurs and solar enterprises. I think the enterprises are slightly larger in size and they sometimes try and cover the irrigation market in the entire village. A lot more action on this has been happening in Eastern India as well as in Bangladesh, where IDCOL has been promoting large size solar irrigation enterprises. And finally, in one state in India, in Maharashtra, there have been experiments of deploying decentralized feeder tail end solar plants, which are deployed by solar developers, but then they are basically set up to first provide energy to farmers, and then if there's any surplus left, then that is evacuated to the grid. So there, the involvement of farmers is much less. There's more of a private sector driven model where the developers get paid for all the solar energy that they generate, but part of it is first supplied to farmers and then the rest is supplied to the grid. So all of these are in different stages of development. And then there are some which are even relatively new, which are still emerging. I want to spend a minute talking about this particular model. By creating this opportunity for farmers to sell surplus power to the grid, what we do is we are incentivizing efficient use of energy and therefore efficient use of water. What we found is that when farmers have grid connected solar pumps, they only use 1/3 of the energy that the solar panels can generate for meeting all their irrigation requirement. And 2/3 of the energy they can actually evacuate to the grid, and they can earn as much from that evacuation of energy as they are earning from agriculture. So this is a way of doubling farmers' income, but also creating positive incentives. And these are areas where farmers get subsidized electricity. So this is also a way to reduce that. In India, the electricity subsidy that farmers receive is 20 billion US dollars every year. That's how much subsidy is given to 15 or 16 million farmers. Now, if we can, instead of giving that subsidy and creating perverse incentives for groundwater depletion, if we can use the same money to actually solarize these farmers, we can create positive incentives and also create a new avenue of opening up solar investments, which will also, I think in the future, it will also encourage more farmers to invest private capital into solar pumps because they are not just irrigation devices, they are actually money making machines for the farmers. We did a small experiment with 9 farmers in Gujarat under the EME Tata program. And now the government of Gujarat has scaled it up to 4,500 farmers in Gujarat. And EME is studying what has been the impact of that. But this is also part of the government of India's ambitious PM Kusum program, under which the government plans to deploy 1.5 million grid connected solar pumps all over the country in the next 3 or 4 years. Another experiment that we are doing in partnership with Sustain Plus, which is supported by IKEA Foundation, is to see whether solar pumps can make sense as a business investment. Now, the government is promoting a large number of farmer producer organizations, and civil society organizations like CINI are supporting production hubs, helping farmers produce more agriculture commodities and then sell them better on better terms in the market. Now, whether such FPOs can make investments in solar pumps and then offer irrigation as a service to farmers. So farmers don't have to invest any capital. They just pay for the irrigation that they use. They also don't have to worry about maintenance of these systems or operations of these systems. That all of that can be taken care by the FPO or whatever enterprise. In another state, we are trying to see whether this is a good enterprise for self-help groups, women self-help groups. That also creates a good opportunity for self-help groups to, in addition to just being microcredit or micro-saving institutions, they also become enterprises that offer irrigation as a service. Now, there are various benefits of doing this over deploying individual off-grid pumps for individual farmers. Um, we are doing these experiments in Bihar and in Jharkhand in partnership with Sustain Plus under a program called SE4RL, Solar Energy for Rural Livelihoods. This is supported by GIZ and IKEA Foundation. And we hope that this will become another avenue for scaling up solarization pretty rapidly. Then there are three other models which are still very nascent around the world, but which have huge potential in the future. One is micro solar pumps, especially for small farmers who irrigate small parcels. There is opportunity to have sub HP solar pumps which are mobile. I think the technology development here is still yet to mature because, as you can see, even though we are doing micro solar pumps which are supposed to be mobile, we are still using panels which were designed to be set up in ground mounted solar parks, right? So we don't need these panels. We need to come up with new designs of solar panels which are more suitable for micro solar pumps, and that is something that we want to work on in the future. So technological and design improvements can spur development of this particular model. There is agrivoltaics, which is picking up in India. There are a few pilot projects that have been done, but again, in partnership with GIZ and Fraunhofer Institute of Solar Energy, EME is going to work on this particular, on developing farmer-friendly business models for agrivoltaics in India as well as in other countries in the world. And then there are other one model that the government of India has experimented with is canal top solar, and now we see that several other countries, including US, are trying to do this. Um, Costs here are significantly higher, so I think this will work where land is very scarce and very expensive. But otherwise, it may not make sense everywhere. But there's also floating solar, photovoltaics, which might actually replace these in many countries, especially in the developing world. So the key opportunities for learning and promotion of South cooperation are in terms of inspiration. What can we learn from the technical, financial, and institutional innovations that are happening around the developing world? How can we learn from technology development interventions or experiments, and how can we make sure that once an experiment is done in one place, it can be quickly scaled up in other locations? How can we learn from the policy pilots that are happening? Most of these are not. When we do these pilots, we often don't know the potential of scaling of these pilots. Like when we worked with those 9 farmers in Gujarat, we had no idea that it could eventually become something that will reach 1.5 million farmers. But this is more of a learning by doing. So we jump into doing these experiments, and then we figure out how scalable these models are. So coming up with insights for affordable, equitable, and sustainable business models, that has been the core of EME's work in South Asia as well as in Africa. Fitting models to context. What will work in Gujarat may not work in other parts of India or other parts of the world. But we are seeing that there are lessons which can be taken across geographies. We are seeing that the experience of India is already being used in Nepal, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan to come up with roadmap for solarization in these countries, and we hope to foster similar learnings across Asia and Africa. There are different market conditions. We've also worked with the government of India to develop decision support tools. The Ministry of New and Renewable Energy in India asked EME to work with the Indian Council of Agriculture Research to develop a solar irrigation pump sizing tool, which they have now adopted for use in the Government of India's program. We are now, as part of Nexus Gains initiative, we are working to develop a similar tool for Nepal. But I think this is also something, or these kind of work is also something that we want to do in other parts of the world. There are lessons about creating an enabling ecosystem of services as well as capacities which will support solarization, and to identify what are the drivers of scale. What can we learn from these successful experiments? Also, what can we learn from failures? There's a lot of experiential learning that requires documentation, sharing of experiences, contextualization of best practices, and co-designing trainings as well as capacity building programs. And for that, what we need is partnerships such as the one that we are doing this session with. For example, with the International Solar Alliance and UNDP, and we hope to build more such partnerships in the future. So I'll stop here and we'll move on to the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Silpa, for the excellent presentation and also highlighting the different solar technologies, the decentralized applications that can be effectively utilized in the agriculture. That is solar for agriculture, as well as um, giving the insights on how we can improve our rural livelihood as well. Even touching on the surplus energy that we can produce from solar pumps, which we can even sell or even evaporate through grid and get extra income for the rural communities. Thank you for that. And now I think we have set the context perfectly for our next session. That's our panel discussions, where we can explore more about opportunities for learning as well as sharing of experiences, and also in the end, even self highlighted about the collaborations, how we can work towards that, particularly from our Asia and African region. So, for this, ladies and gentlemen, let's jointly invite Dr. Darshini Ravindranath. She's the senior researcher at and also program lead for solar and climate resilience with the AME as our moderator. Darshini, the floor is yours, and I would like to hand over to you to invite our esteemed panelists and then offer a very, very fruitful discussions.
Hi, everyone. Get that. So I'm Dr. Darshini Ravindranath, and I'm from senior researcher at IMI. I'm very excited to be here and moderate this panel. A little selfishly as well, at IMI India, I lead on solar energy for agricultural resilience project. And I've been sort of furiously taking notes on sort of how findings from projects like ours can offer value, as Shilp said, both in terms of successes and failures for in other countries and regions and in other institutional contexts. Um, as we've heard from just the insightful presentation just now, I think solar power offers enormous potential right now within the global climate agenda. While and alliances like ISA are doing fantastic work in bringing people like us together at a global stage to sort of talk about this. While I think some of the challenges presented by implementation will be context specific, the opportunities are universal. So we have a lot to learn from each other. So, with that said, I'm very keen to bring on stage our diverse and accomplished panelists to sort of who are all playing in their different ways very important role in deploying solar technologies to take this conversation forward. So in no particular order, let me start with Lance Go, Principal Portfolio Management Specialist at Agriculture, Food, Nature and Rural Development at the Asian Development Bank. Amanda Cody, Chief of Staff at IKEA Foundation. Karma Shewang, Chief Engineer, Department of Energy in Bhutan. Seth Mahu, Deputy Director of Renewable Energy at the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum in the Government of Ghana. And Ashish Chaturvedi, Head of Action for Climate and Environment at UNDP India. Thank you all for joining us. Lance, I'm going to start with you because I understand you have to dash off. Okay, all right. All right. Yeah. You have obviously over 20 years of experience working in Asia and Pacific. And ADB has also been supporting solarization efforts across Asia, particularly expansion of solar pumps. So can you tell us a bit about how ADB's experience has been in promoting solar applications in agriculture?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Thank you to ISA, ME, and UNDP for inviting us to be here, and thank you for Shilpa's excellent presentation. Clearly very rich, and Emmy's doing some excellent work there. And I don't know if we can really say much more than that, but I can describe some of the work that ADB's been doing, particularly in the South Asia region. Some of these projects I've been directly involved with, and others are my colleagues. So I excuse my laptop on my lap. I have to call on that to get you some figures and data. So maybe I can talk country by country about the experience that ADB's had with investing in solar irrigation pumping. It's a little bit limited, but it's certainly growing. It's certainly a growing interest business line for us, and a lot of interest from our developing member countries. Starting in Bangladesh, back in 2014, ADB supported the government with a $60 million loan to modernize the Mahuri irrigation project. This is an area near Fini, where they lift water out of cowls, which are attached to a reservoir, low lift pumps. Over 800 pumps, it's about, as I said, 17,000 hectares. They needed to modernize that system to convert those diesel pumps to electric. And so we're helping with that, and most of it will be grid connected. However, we do have pilots of a number of solar pumps on that project. A little bit of, and attached to those solar pumps and the electric pumps, we're also piloting across all of them the use of prepaid smart card meters, which are really a novel and effective way of basically getting revenue return from the farmers. They pay to use the pumps, but it also means that the water resources are managed more effectively. A little bit of there's some hesitation from farmers to go down this approach. They were very comfortable with the diesel pumps. They certainly had the supply chain to operate, maintain, renew those pumps. They had access to cheap diesel. They were very uncomfortable with changing over to electric pumps. So, and then they're certainly very cautious about going to solar pumping. So that's why we convinced them on converting to the electric pumps, but they were still quite cautious about solar. There's a lot of cloud cover in that particular part of Bangladesh. We're piloting it to demonstrate that they will manage quite well. That project's still ongoing. Just recently, actually, I think this year the Prime Minister of Bangladesh endorsed the Bangladesh Solar Irrigation Roadmap 2023 to 2031, which ADB worked with the government to prepare. This is quite a comprehensive roadmap, and I'll give you some context with that. Sorry, how much time do I have? I don't want to talk too long and take the.
No, you've got 45 minutes. So
Okay, so I'll try and keep this short though. Yeah, so 73% of the cultivated land in Bangladesh is irrigated by pumped groundwater during the Rabi season, of which half of it they use about 1.24 million small diesel pumps. The rest of the cultivated land is irrigated with about 340,000 electric grid-connected pumps. So these diesel pumps, they consume about 1 million tons of diesel each year, about $900 million in value each year. So the electric pumps consume about 2 gigawatt hours of energy each summer, sorry. And this really, the electricity is provided by a highly subsidized tariff, and this really distorts the agricultural production market. So the roadmap aims to add up to 2,000 megawatts in peak energy combined solar capacity of the country by year 2030. In solar irrigation pump stations, small ground mounted solar systems over farmland. So very similar to what was being presented earlier. The new combined solar capacities will have an export capacity to the grid of up to 1,300 gigawatt hours a year, equivalent to about 2.5% of Bangladesh's electricity generation. There's three main components to this project. One is the installation of the 1,000 megawatt peak solar pumps through about 45,000 standalone solar irrigation pump systems, and this will replace 225,000 diesel pumps and irrigate about 433,000 hectares of land. The second component of that is pilot phasing the hybridization and solarization of 25 megawatt peak solar capacity, or approximately 1,250 grid-connected irrigation pumps between 2021 and 2025. These hybrid pumps will be able to export the surplus power generated to the national grid. And that the third part is pilot phase of commissioning of up to 25 megawatt peaks of small decentralized ground-mounted grid-connected solar PV systems. and that is on agricultural lands. And this will be hopefully supported by farmers and private developers. They can become independent power producers and sell their electricity directly to the grid through a PPA agreement. So the total cost of this roadmap is around $1.6 billion. The government's looking for financing from both the public and private sector, so it doesn't put additional fiscal pressure on the government. Financing support is going to be sought from all MDBs, such as ourselves, ADB and World Bank and so forth, green climate funds and other climate financiers to bring down the cost of financing. And there's also opportunities there for private sector to be involved. We're also in discussions with Bangladesh government. Just tell me if I'm talking too much, yeah?
I go for another 2 minutes and then
Oh,
I'll come back to you.
I hope you're finding this interesting. Okay. We're also there's this area of Bangladesh called the Burin region, which is up in the northeast. It's fantastic. This area was really a dry area, and through the certain individuals in the Bangladesh government, they installed tube well systems and really turned the area of this into a highly productive area. But they do it with these um, diesel tube wells. Now they've approached us about 10,000 diesel tube wells. They've approached us to convert that to solar electricity irrigation pumps. So this is in our pipeline, and we're working with the government. Just briefly, coming to India, we have a large project in Madhya Pradesh where it's a fully pressurized system to 125,000 hectares, massive pumping stations. We were initially designing that to have a floating solar system on the reservoir itself. Um, but this is where one of the challenges comes from. So the state government, even though they thought that was a very elegant and future forward-looking idea, they have surplus electricity on their grid, so they didn't see the benefit of spending money on investing on that solar system at the moment. But that could be something in the future. Also in Nepal, we're looking at replicating the Burind project down on the Terai. Same issue there is that the government again now has surplus clean energy on the grid, and they're not ready to take this next step to use solar power. But again, this is something that could be applied in the future. So thank you for letting me share that experience with you. Yeah.
Thank you, Lance. That was really interesting. I think you brought up quite a few interesting points there. One on sort of the differences between working in these different countries, but also similarities in some of the challenges. And particularly, it was good to hear about the financing opportunities, because I think small scale agri-food systems are generally not as well financed as other sectors. I think only 0.8% of global climate finance. And so, yeah, that was interesting to hear. But in speaking some of your implementation challenges, Amanda, the IKEA Foundation is supporting decentralized renewable energy applications in Eastern India and working in different parts of the world. So could you share some of your experiences and what sort of the key impacts have been and learnings?
Yeah, sure. So we're doing a lot of work at the moment with partners such as the IWMI, Sustain Plus, Selco, across the East India area. And we're seeing some really remarkable things. And I think, first of all, one of the key learnings we have here is not a surprise, but solar energy is actually a no-brainer when it comes to rural communities and agriculture. It's cleaner, it's more affordable, especially when you look at the rising prices of diesel. And we can get the energy there much quicker to where we need it than we can with other options. So it makes sense. I think the second thing that is very, very clear to us from all of our experiences so far is there is nobody who knows what they need most better than the farmer themselves. So, we are never going to make these solutions work unless we put the end user at the heart of the solution. So we're very, very keen to be looking at technology beyond the technological solution. It's about energy as an enabler for development in ways that can improve lives and livelihoods, whilst at the same time helping us to stay within planetary boundaries. And we're seeing some really, really positive successes there. To give you one example, we currently have around or more than 3,000 solar pump installations. And what we're seeing from that is if they are implemented in an efficient and consumer-centric way, in a way that takes an ecosystems approach, then actual incomes from farmers can improve by 2 to 3 times. And when I say implemented with an ecosystems approach and in an efficient way, these are solar pumps with efficient solar irrigation, with efficient solar irrigation practices, with good crop advice, with care for soil quality. So there are a whole lot of factors that come into this. But when done well, the results are very impressive. And we're seeing this over and over again.
Thank you. I really like what you said about the farmer. They know best what they need in the field. So that's I was at an event the other day, and they were talking about how to improve the livelihoods of women, and it's sort of no one knows the value of water more than the person who walks 10 miles to collect it. So that sort of resonates with something like that. I'm now going to move on to Mr. Karma Shuang. So I think Bhutan's plans for solarization of agriculture, it would be really interesting to hear that, particularly given the sort of unique context of mountain agriculture. And also 55% of protected areas and a lot of settlements close by. So sort of how that human wildlife conflict is managed, and some of the interesting ways that solar power is being used in that regard.
First of all, a very good afternoon. Thank you once again to ISA for giving us this opportunity to be on the panel here. And of course, I must commend the IWMI for the wonderful presentation, which is insightful, impressive, and inspirational as well. And I think Bhutan can learn a lot in terms of agri-PV solar deployment is concerned. And of course, I'm surprised to see that IK is also into a business of solar. So I thought because IK is mainly associated with the furniture house, furniture houses and furniture. So I'm happy to see that IK is with the solar PV and then the solarization of agriculture, which is very good. And as far as Bhutan is concerned, definitely agriculture is the mainstay of our economy, particularly primarily because the maximum, I must say that around 60% of our population is dependent on agriculture, and therefore irrigation is the key element for the country. And for the irrigation, what is the importance of irrigation, the importance of having water uh, being made available to their fields. The value of it can only be known by the farmers. And I, being a farmer's son, definitely know what is the pain of having water reach your fields in the remote areas. And being an agrarian society, we can clearly say that water is a very important part of our agriculture in Bhutan, though our uh, houses are all located on the mountain tops as well as in the deep gorges. The irrigation is a big challenge for us, and because the main rivers are generally flowing in the deep gorges, so therefore having a water to irrigate the fields remains a big challenge. And on the other aspect is the rising climate change impacts. These climate change impacts are definitely drying up the irrigation sources. So therefore, the need for solarization of agriculture is becoming more and more important, and we definitely need to explore the ways and means to ensure what are the available technologies that we can deploy, be it through grid or be it through solarization. And solarization, I see this primarily because in the various parts of the country, we don't have any grid. The grid availability is not so uh, what I must say is the grid is not so penetrated in the far-flung areas. So therefore, solar is the very important thing. Traditionally, this solar has been used as mainly for solar home lighting systems, but now increasingly, the Department of Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock has found out that uh, the revolution in agriculture is a requirement, and so therefore the increasing need for the irrigation in the agriculture fields becomes of paramount importance. So given this, I must share that we have seen a number of irrigated fields using earlier this diesel, for instance, and then of course the grid is are also there. Diesel, because diesel is a little cheaper than the electricity, of course, because for electricity you have to take the grid to that place where you fix those pumps, etc. And diesel, because it's almost mobile, like a solar mobile, which you were sharing earlier. So therefore, solarization is the next step that we need to follow, and we have definitely implemented few solar projects in Bhutan. And the way I see it is, we definitely need to explore how best we can take advantage of the availability of solar panels especially in the rural communities where cooperatives can operate this solar PV based irrigation systems, and therefore the change in the agriculture yields and the food security and nutritional security which you talked about can be definitely achieved for the times to come, you see. So that's a very important aspect that Bhutan would definitely like to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It'll be interesting to talk at some point about what role institutions like IMI and ISA can play in sort of supporting Bhutan in this transition. I'm going to move on to Seth Mahu. I understand Ghana's got big plans for solarization of agriculture. They recently announced 200 mini grids to be set up by 2030. So if you can talk a bit about sort of some of the key government initiatives and policies that are going on right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I want to extend my appreciation to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to highlight some of the things that the government is doing to improve agriculture through renewable energy. My ministry is responsible for energy development in Ghana largely, and we are focusing on active aspects of energy service delivery. And we see agriculture as one of the key areas that can enable the uptake of renewable energy. In the sense that about 20% of our GDP is from agriculture, and we have about 70% of smallholder farmers who are active in that space. And these farmers largely are operating in off-grid areas. So largely they depend on rain-fed agriculture. And the question is, with the adverse impact of climate change, what should we do to be able to build resilience for these farmers? One of the key policy interventions to be able to deploy solar energy and also enable these farmers to be able to have access to water, either in the form of surface water or groundwater. And that is something that my ministry is collaborating with other partners, including the International Water Management Institute in Accra, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Water Resource Commission of Ghana, and other development partners to do. Now, as we all know it from the presentation we just received from IMI, solar irrigation does not come cheaply. It's quite expensive. And if farmers put their investment there, they need to depend on it. So as a ministry, we have put in place policy intervention that allows farmers who are close to the grid to be able to integrate their solar irrigation facilities into the grid so that during the off-peak period where these facilities are not being put to use, they can export electricity into the grid under what we call the net metering scheme. And this scheme has just been rolled out, and we hope to see farmers improve their revenues from that regards. We have also seen intervention in this area improving incomes and livelihoods of farmers. Farmers have been able to increase their yields by almost threefold because they are now able to have access to affordable electricity and they can irrigate their fields all year round. Interestingly, I was having a conversation with a Dutch colleague of mine, and he said something which was quite striking. He said, "We do not need rain for agriculture, we need water." And I quite agree with him that where we have water, we should be able to provide energy service to enable farmers, utilize that water for irrigation. And once that can be assured, farmers are able to work. In the area of large scale farming, we have also been able to come out with what we call the Public Sector Sustainability Energy Action Program. And this program is looking at deploying renewable energy to provide electricity for large irrigation schemes. Over here, we would install solar systems in megawatt capacity, and this is used to drive huge pumps that are able to push water into gravity fed canals that send water to farmers who need it the most. And this has gained traction in the sense that you can see multiple benefits coming in. You can easily quantify the amount of emission savings that can be made there, which can be monetized to improve on the investment. And you can also see a lot of farmers who may not be able to absorb the upfront cost now being able to participate in this scheme because investors could come in, put up the solar system, and then when the water is pushed to these farmers, they are able to make some revenue from that service. And this I see as a win-win for all. And we are seeing a lot of traction in this. We've just signed an agreement with the Korean government to install some megawatts of solar in some of the irrigation facilities we have in Ghana, particularly in an area we call Towenya, which is quite close to Accra. And this will be producing electricity to pump water for irrigation. Another important aspect that we see in this space is the fact that we also see technology improvement and technology transfer. Because there's so much demand for solar irrigation, we are seeing a lot of market players on the system in the area of pumps, in the area of solar components like inverters, what have you, which is really good for the market. And I believe strongly that going forward, we'll be seeing a lot more happening in this space. The reason why I say this is that even if you take the smallholder farmers, who constitute just about 70%, the demand for solar there alone is about $2.2 billion. That is a good market for anybody who wants to participate in any economy. So these are some of the things that I think we'll be able to use to, accelerate solar irrigation uptake in Ghana. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting and very exciting to see what the future holds for Ghana and solarization. You also brought up groundwater, which is, always a big concern for solar irrigation. Sort of, are we over extracting groundwater? I think what you said about targeting the right regions is very important, and hopefully that's work that we're doing in South Asia and we can be shared very soon. Ashish? UNDP is working with the IBSA, which is the India, Brazil, South Africa Fund. And you're working to set up solar pilot projects in up to 10 countries. So it would be good to hear from you how that's going and what some of the key lessons are, particularly in terms of different challenges in different countries.
Thanks. And of course, delighted to be here. Many thanks to ISA for organizing this jointly with us. And of course, Amy as well. And Shilp, fantastic presentation. Uh, so I'm going to start a little bit sort of beyond what we're doing with IBSA, and I'll come back quickly to it. So in India, we're working very closely with sort of a bunch of partners, including Celco and others, on this rather exciting work on solar cold storages. So we are working with the Bihar Rural Livelihood Mission to establish solar cold storage for women farmers, and the results are really promising already. So this season itself, there has been significant impact on the incomes of the women, and they're very excited about how to kind of scale that up. So we are in conversations with NABARD and in fact sort of with the foundation as well on how to scale up this initiative beyond the kind of grant-based models that are kind of running right now. And I think this is just one sort of a segue to what is the potential. So 40% of the food actually gets wasted in India even before it reaches the market. So the kind of savings that we are talking about, the kind of impact that we are talking about, not only on so the incomes but also greenhouse gas emissions, is massive, right? Uh, and that's sort of one of the reasons why we thought that it's important to take while initiatives are being developed, it's important to take them to other geographies. So rather than saying, okay, let this come to fruition, let's sort of establish, we don't have that kind of sort of luxury of time. So that's the reason why we developed this initiative, which sort of based on the Kusum program, which she'll present it briefly as well. We're taking the lessons of the Kusum program and the learnings from the Kusum program to other countries in Africa and in the one sort of small island developing nation uh, as part of the India, Brazil, South Africa, South-South Cooperation Fund. Uh, it's the first of its kind for us as well at UNDP. The fact that we are kind of doing this based out of a country office. So it's not a global project which is running out of sort of New York or a regional project which is running out of Bangkok. It's actually a global project running out of India. And to actually set up those kinds of mechanisms, the kind of structures has been it's rather sobering experience, I would say. So there's lots of learning there. How do you sort of say, if you want to, and India is very proud of it, of course. The Indian government, the Ministry of External Affairs, the Department of Economic Affairs, the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, is backing us, saying, great job to organize sort of internal systems, internal processes to run this out of a country office and then take it to other countries. It's been, well, sort of an, I guess I can sort of give details, but you know how sort of bureaucracies and organizations are organized. So if you suddenly say, okay, now we need to do it and say, take the experience of a country and bring it to say 10 other countries, how do you collaborate with different bureaus and different offices and so on and so forth? Uh, but we're, we're doing fairly well. So, in the sense that we're doing now the procurement. So, 3 or 4 countries will do the procurement this year of pumps, which will then be kind of installed, and we have partners and excellent support from ISA, by the way, with the national focal points who are already sort of embedded in the governments and engaging with the governments in very many significant ways. Now, this is just a beginning for us because we believe that this is potentially sort of a rather quick scalable model. One of the constraints is, of course, this is a $2.5 million grant, far from sufficient for meeting the needs of these 10 countries. We're talking about currently we're going to procure maybe 200, 240 pumps, but demand assessment that we did jointly with ISA was upwards of the range of 300,000 pumps, only for these 10 countries. So just imagine to go from this to that range, to that scale, requires, of course, massive injections of finance, but also sort of the structures that are required at the country level, but also this grouping level, if you might say. And of course, therefore, need for how do you start thinking about what will be the pricing if the demand aggregation actually is successful? How do you bring down the cost of these solar water pumps fast enough so that the challenges that the farmers are facing in terms of taking this sort of well, taking and also taking loans for it potentially at some point in time to kind of make this work. So, what I think needs to be done, and you alluded to it, there are 2 things. One is to sort of have a much better decision support system to understand what is required, the scale of pump, the size of the pump, the kind of sort of irrigation requirement on the agriculture irrigation side. And if you can actually just roll that out, and this is something that we're discussing with a lot of sort of actors, uh, how do you actually have that kind of a decision support system but for every country which is possibly interested in this? And the other piece is, of course, about how do you bring down the aggregation and how do you bring down the costs through aggregation models and which are the interested parties in that. And so for both of these, we are kind of engaged and want to continue working with ISA in the next few years. And of course, the reason why we've we've been clubbed together, so in IMI and as well as UNDP, is to also think about how do we work together much better in both of these aspects. Thanks.
Thank you very much. You started also with talking about cold storage, which I think one of the things that we can also look at is some of the co-benefits of solar and how that can be brought on. I think we have maybe 5 more minutes. So I think maybe we'll do a quick sort of round. I used to be a civil servant, so always have to end with what is the action? What are we taking away from all this? So if everyone could maybe just talk about two sort of potential themes around which the South-South learning can focus on, that would be great. Maybe we'll go the other way around. So Ashish, if you want to start.
Yes, I think the first sort of area where there's lots to be learned is on policy enablers, right? So, what kind of regulatory sort of support is required? Uh, what kind of policy enablers at the national and subnational level and sectoral level? Uh, how do you use long-term low emission development strategies? Every country now, well, sort of a lot of countries have their long-term low emission development strategies. All of them have their NDCs as well. How does this topic feature into their long-term low emission development strategy, and especially sort of in for developing countries, agriculture, countries which have a significant agricultural focus? I don't think that the attention this topic deserves is there in those long-term low emission development strategies. There's great amount of focus on utility scale solar, utility scale sort of renewables, of course, decarbonization of hard to abate sectors for very good reasons. But I think this is kind of co-benefits this sector offers, and the kind of well, multiple SDGs which are touched by this sort of sector. I think we need to make a little bit more sort of stronger advocacy. And I think UNDP is committed to doing this, and I'm sure sort of IMI and other sort of partners here are committed to doing it. So to sort of push this a little bit more strongly in the long-term low emission development strategies, and of course the subsequent ratcheting up of the ambition as part of the NDCs as well. So I think that's more at the national and sort of course, supranational level. And how do we exchange amongst different countries? And the second kind of obvious thing, I would leave the finance topic to others sort of on the opinion. But I think it's more about these decision support systems. Uh, there are, well, so you've also already mentioned a couple of countries where you've worked on this. Uh, I think decision support, the ability to develop the right kind of decision support systems on what kind of technologies are required, where, what scale, if you can actually drill down to the level of a particular farm and say, this is the kind of solar water pump which is required without having to invest significant amount of resources in feasibility studies, that is going to completely change the pace at which adoption can happen. And decision support systems require significant domain knowledge and expertise, which is not necessarily available sort of evenly across the different geographies that we're talking about. So I think these are things where South-South cooperation can actually really uh, well keep the ball rolling.
Thank you very much. You've said a lot on the policy, so I'm not going to dwell on that. In my view, two things to take away as aim for South-South cooperation. The first will be strengthening the manufacturing capability between this cooperation. There are countries within the South-South that have made steady progress in the area of manufacturing of green technologies. And I think we need to focus on that to strengthen that arrangement so that other countries within the cooperation can be able to, pass some of these capabilities. And once that is done, we can bring supply close to the market, and that will drive the cost of technology down and also help improve the uptake of green initiatives within the corporation. The second aspect, in my view, should be knowledge sharing. We need to strengthen a bridge that allows us to be able to share knowledge across the corporation. Others are doing well, others are not doing well. What do we do? Can we create that pool of knowledge base that others can tap into without any constraint and restrictions? This is critical. If we're able to do that, I believe we can go to get far with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. From my perspective, what I see is two things. Number one, we know that South Asia is a powerhouse of all the rich experiences, all the alternatives that you have put in. So therefore, I see that what are the technological innovations that you have in place, how best you could scale up these things and ensure that other countries around you, like Bhutan and Nepal, elsewhere, how could they benefit? And this whatever technologies that you have adopted, what are the financing mechanisms that you have, and keeping in mind the element of food security. After all, today we talk about climate security, climate change and its impacts, but it's better late than never to also give a lot of focus to food security as well. Ultimately, if there's no food, definitely we are at stake. You see, so therefore, I feel the need of the hour is to also ensure that to uh, ensure the technological penetration in all the countries around the South Asian countries. And the other aspect that I see is whatever policy interventions that you have, whatever experience sharing that you have, I think we must really collaborate. And that is, suppose I feel the key aspect for all of us to ensure that we endeavor on that front. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Two two thoughts from me. One is if you really want to upscale the use of solar irrigation pumps, we have to crack the financing puzzle. Um, the cost is too great just for governments to pick up on their own. It's too great for MDBs and other financing agencies to also do. I think where the opportunity there lies is with the local commercial banks, but they need to be made, they need to become comfortable with the business models, and I think that's where there's an opportunity is to work with those local commercial banks and work with the local, private sector. I think if the local private sector can get access to reasonable financing terms, then this should be a business model in every community. Really, I mean, the supply chain for PVs are there. It's just really the appetite by the local private sector. So we this is something that we need to look at. On the South-South learning and exchange, I'll give you a couple of examples. Farmers are very risk averse, particularly small holding farmers. They have a small amount of land that it needs to produce their income. It normally produces their food, and they don't have the appetite to take on something new. So you really need to convince them. The departments they work with are very kind of, what would you say, there's a lot of inertia for change. They kind of set in their ways. They've got their own internal business practices and focuses, and their attention's on just doing business as usual. They're not really that geared up for innovation and change. And then politicians are really too busy, focused on so many things that when it comes to this, they don't give it enough attention. My point here is that we had two occasions where we took ministers, principal secretaries, DGs, we took engineers, and we even took farmers across international borders to show them, to demonstrate to them successful stories. And it was really constructive. And, allowing farmers to talk to the other farmers, allowing the technocrats to talk to the other technocrats, politicians, they get to share this knowledge and they get this confidence and they get to see how it could be replicated in their own areas, in their own countries. We've had a lot of success with that model. It is expensive. It requires someone like a development bank to facilitate that process. But yeah, if we can do more of that, I think our collective jobs, will be a lot easier. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would just like to say, actually, I've had the great fortune of speaking to some very innovative and forward-thinking smallholder farmers in the past couple of years in India. And what I realized from that is these guys are actually hungry for innovation and solutions if they believe that those solutions are genuinely adding value and addressing a real need that they have. So I think just another call there to really put the end user at the heart of the solutions and engage them in co-creating. And I think if I had to say two things, it builds on points that have already been made. One is absolutely knowledge sharing, particularly failure. I think we've got to get very open, honest, and brave about sharing our failures. We've seen some really good examples of that with the Selco Foundation Failure Conference that they organized. And inspired by that, the recent report published by one of our partners, Acumen, Failing Forward. If we are going to move fast in this area and reduce risk for smallholder farmers, then we need to learn from the failures of others and make sure that those are transferred and shared openly. And the second, again, is collaboration. And I think in a very specific context, we need people from across sectors, from finance, from private sector, from governments to help us test more models. So group ownership of solar assets, irrigation as a service, different financing models, market linkages. So we need people to come in and help us test these models and solutions so that we can show what works and roll that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please. Yes. Any questions from the panel? You can go.
Thank you very much. My name is Abdullahi. I head an organization two organizations actually. I'm the executive director for the Nigerian Center for Climate Renewal, Resilience and Adaptation. I'm also a co-founder of of an NGO called Climate Action and Community Outreach Initiative. So my problem, this is something that bothers me, and I just wanted to share it and talk about it here today. And I'm happy she landed on it, talking about innovation. In my interaction with people in the rural areas, these are people that are isolated. I'm from the northern part of Nigeria, where you have a lot of crisis and you have a lot of issues with the lake Chad that is shrinking, and you have a lot of issues of migration of people from the north to the south, causing issues of herders and farmers clashes. And you have communities that are isolated, that government policies are trying to change because of our national determined contribution as it relates to our signing to the Paris Climate Change Agreement. So the solutions to women or to people in the rural areas is, please do not cut down trees. The alternative is clean cook stoves, right? So when they give you clean cook stoves, they give you briquettes as the source of oil for burning for your cooking. The problem with that is that the value chain is not sustainable. So I keep asking myself, how come UNDP and other international companies have not thought about an integrated platform that provide alternative sources of energy to people in the rural areas? For example, you can have a single platform that uses both briquettes and solar, so that when the briquettes are not there, they can easily switch to solar. We in the urban centers have alternative multiple sources of energy for our cooking, but they don't have that. They don't have that opportunity. Recently, I founded personally on my own, a local company in Nigeria, a fabricating company. Of course, I'm the chair. I'm also a businessman. I said, look, please, don't you just come up with something people in the rural area can use? He said, yes, I think I can do so, and he's doing it. So what worries me in all this policy, in all this discussion, is that we do not look at solutions that really takes care of people in the rural area. We tend to talk about, I understand it's fine, but majority of the people that suffer the consequences of climate change are people that need alternative sources of energy for their livelihood. So that's what worries me. And I'm wondering why that's not part of the discussion here today. So I'm happy you talked about innovation. I think this is something that we should all look into. People in Africa are suffering. We are hungry, we're poor. Forget about all the conversation we're having here today. The truth of the matter is that people in the rural areas do not have alternative sources of energy, and they will definitely continue to cut down trees, whether we like it or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone?
Yes, I think, well, that is not something which can be contested. I think that's a reality. There is a there was a panel here in the same pavilion a few weeks ago, well, sort of last week, sorry, which was on mission energy access, and it actually focused precisely on the point that you mentioned about how we need to start thinking to have a separate mission on providing energy access to the 650, 700 million people in Africa who still don't have energy access, who suffer from energy poverty, who lack energy security. And there are multiple solutions which are sort of being worked upon. So, of course, there are issues of looking at cook stoves, but beyond cook stoves, looking at going electric. So, in India, we're actually thinking about how does one go. It depends on different solutions for different geographies and the sort of context specific solutions where you need, of course, the person who's actually going to use that equipment, the solution, to be a part of the solution design process as well. So I think these are things which are sort of not going to appear from outside or from international companies or organizations. I think these will have to be co-created with the communities themselves and with the national sort of not necessarily governments, but non-state actors and private companies as well, which are innovators in their own right in the local geographies. So I think this is a fairly important part of the agenda, the mission energy access discussion, which there is a paper which has just been published by sort of the ISA Director General and the UNDP Administrator as well, which does talk about especially the issue around energy access and then with focus on Africa.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? I think we have time for one more. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know speak English, but I need your support.
Sure.
Tell me, please.
Yeah, okay. Okay. So it says, we, my indigenous organization, have 3 million hectares of forest in the Amazon of Peru. We do not want electricity from fuel. We need energy from solar panels. We want transfer of clean technology, training, and we want to use only solar panels. How can indigenous people access the use of solar panels? And he's Alan Ribiera, president of the Federation of Native Border Communities of Putumayo in the Peruvian Amazon. Does anyone want to take that?
Hi. Maybe that's better. That's better. Okay, I work for the Asia Development Bank, so not in the Amazon, unfortunately. Otherwise, we could help. But I would say that if a similar community of people in our region had the same requests from as you do, then they would approach their local politicians and they will say, "We have this need. Can you help?" They will get support to prepare a proposal to either your government and also either through to maybe the American Development Bank or one of the local development banks. There's also a lot of interest, I think, from bilateral lenders and the like. So, you might find that there's um, the USAID might be a good option. I would encourage you to reach out to those sort of people, and then they can come through and they can talk with your communities, see what your requests are, and see how it could be designed and implemented and financed.
Thank you. Let me just add a bit to that. You need to put this within the context of your national policy. We don't know what the policy of your country is with respect to access to energy. You need to explore that and see what opportunities that you have in there that you can take advantage of. Building on his point, if you're able to identify what the needs are in terms of policy, you should be able to deal with the right institutions, to be able to solicit for support to do solar for energy. Let me just give you a case in Ghana. We have multiple approach to electrification. Communities have the right to approach government ahead of government's plan to extend electricity to them. And when such requests are made, we look at it as a specific case, and then we look for resources. Some communities are able to mobilize, but not sufficient. So government comes in, donor partners come in to support, and such solutions are delivered. They could come in the form of mini grids. They could come in terms of solar home systems, which are isolated. So these are all ways that you can use to really realize that ambition. Why you wouldn't want to cut trees, but use solar energy to meet the energy demands or energy needs of your people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. I think we're running out of time. So just to summarize, I think knowledge sharing, collaboration came up a lot, but most importantly, co-creation with the communities that we are looking to support is critical. So thank you very much to all of you for taking time out of your very busy schedules. And yeah, we'll close there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dasani, for the excellent panel discussions, and it's a very, very enriching. We wish we had more time to continue the discussion. We are very delighted to have with us the Director General, Mr. Mark from EMA. I'd like to invite him to present the closing remarks and also wrapping up the program. So.